Richard Widmark truly hated him more than anyone. Part 1. The Unsent Letter. They say Richard Widmark was the most principled man in Hollywood. 60 years in the business, 80 films, never a scandal, never a controversy, never a tell-all interview. He kept his mouth shut, lived quietly, died quietly, the way he wanted. But before he died, he wrote a letter, and that letter tells a different story. 2008, Roxbury, Connecticut. A small town far from Hollywood, far from the lights and cameras and compromises. Richard Widmark's grandson, Matthew, is cleaning out his grandfather's desk. The old man died 3 weeks ago. I am 93 years old. Emphysema, peaceful death, good life. Matthew opens the bottom drawer, the one that was always locked, the one his grandfather told him never to open while he was alive. Inside, under old scripts and forgotten photographs, is a sealed envelope. Yellowed, heavy paper, expensive stationery from another era, the kind people used when letters actually mattered. On the front, in his grandfather's distinctive handwriting, Matthew, to be opened after I'm gone. Matthew's hands shake. His grandfather wasn't sentimental, didn't write letters, didn't express feelings, didn't do deathbed confessions. So why this? He opens it carefully. The seal breaks with a sound like a whisper. Inside, 12 pages, handwritten, dated March 1997, the year Matthew's grandmother died, the year Richard Widmark was suddenly alone after 55 years of marriage. The first paragraph makes Matthew sit down. Matthew, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Good, because these are things I never said out loud. Not to your grandmother, not to your father, not to the priests who gave me last rites, not to anyone. I spent 60 years in Hollywood, made 80 films, worked with legends, got rich, got famous, got respect. People called me the thinking man's tough guy, the actor with principles, the one who turned down roles because they violated his morals. They were right. I did have principles, but I also compromised them again and again, year after year, choice after choice. And I hated myself for it every single day. There were 5 people who made me compromise. 5 people who forced me to choose between my principles and my paycheck, between my conscience and my career, between who I wanted to be and who I had to be to survive. Marilyn Monroe, John Wayne, Elia Kazan, Henry Fonda, Daryl F. Zanuck. I never forgave them. Not one, not even in death. But the truth, Matthew, the truth I'm finally admitting, the person I should hate most isn't any of them. It's me. Because they didn't force me to do anything. They just gave me choices. Hard choices, terrible choices, and I chose wrong every time, and I knew it. That's what eats at you. Not the compromise itself, but the knowing, the clear, conscious knowledge that you're betraying yourself and doing it anyway. This letter isn't an apology. I'm too old and too dead for apologies. This is a confession, the kind Catholics make to priests, except I'm making it to you because you're 25, starting your career. You'll face these choices too. And when you do, I want you to know your principled grandfather. He failed again and again. Maybe you'll do better. I hope so. But if you don't, at least be honest about it. That's the one thing I never was. Love? Grandpa Dick Matthew reads the entire letter in one sitting. 12 pages, 11 years old, written by a man trying to make peace with his compromises before death made peace impossible. This is Richard Widmark's confession, the principled man who wasn't as principled as he pretended. And it starts with the most tragic waste he ever witnessed. Part 2. Marilyn Monroe. The tragic waste. Marilyn Monroe. The name brings to mind images. The white dress, the breathy voice, the blonde bombshell, the tragic suicide at 36. But Richard Widmark remembered her differently. In the letter, Marilyn Monroe. I worked with her once, 1952, Don't Bother to Knock, small thriller. I was the lead. She played a mentally unstable babysitter. This was before she became Marilyn Monroe, the icon. She was still Norma Jean, trying to prove she could act. And she could, Matthew. God, she could. Between takes, we'd talk about Stanislavski, about method acting, about bringing truth to performance. She'd read Dostoevsky, discuss Chekhov, understood character psychology on a level most actors never reach. She was intelligent, genuinely, deeply intelligent, and she was fighting like hell to be taken seriously. The reviews came out. Critics praised me, dismissed her. Monroe, adequate as the girl. One wrote, adequate like she was furniture. But that's not what killed me. What killed me was watching what happened next. The studio, 20th Century Fox, saw her box office potential, but not as an actress, as a commodity, a sex symbol, a blonde joke with curves. They forced her into those roles. The dumb blonde, the mistress, the girl who giggles and wiggles and asks dumb questions while men smirk. I watched Marilyn fight it, demand better scripts, refuse roles, study with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, try to prove she was more than what they made her, and I watched them break her, slowly, methodically, cruelly. Every time she demanded respect, they reminded her, "You're replaceable. There are 1,000 blonde girls who want your job, so giggle, wiggle, be grateful." Eventually, she stopped fighting, started believing what they told her, started seeing herself as they saw her. Just a body, just a face, just a commodity. She died in 1962. Overdose. Everyone called it suicide, depression, mental illness. I call it murder. Hollywood murdered her. Took a brilliant, complex, talented woman and reduced her to a punchline, then acted shocked when she couldn't live with it anymore. Widmark's guilt comes in the next paragraph, and it's devastating. Here's my shame. I was there on that set, working with her, seeing her intelligence, her talent, her potential, and I did nothing. I could have spoken up, could have demanded better treatment, could have used my status as leading man to fight for her. But I didn't, because fighting for Marilyn might have cost me, might have labeled me difficult, might have hurt my relationships with directors and producers. So I stayed silent, did my scenes, collected my check, told myself, it's not my responsibility, it's not my fight. And Marilyn died. And I got to live with the knowledge that I watched talent being destroyed and chose career over courage. That's the first compromise. The first time I put myself before someone who needed help, and it haunts me. Still, even now, even 45 years later, Matthew, reading this, understood something about his grandfather, something nobody else knew. Richard Widmark wasn't haunted by his enemies. He was haunted by his silences. The letter continues. People think evil is active, that it's about doing bad things. But I learned something different. Evil is passive. It's watching bad things happen and doing nothing. It's seeing injustice and staying silent. It's choosing comfort over courage. I wasn't evil to Marilyn. I just wasn't good enough. And that's a different kind of failure. The kind that stays with you. The kind you can't fix. The kind that makes you wonder, who was I really? The principled man or just another coward who talked a good game? Marilyn Monroe showed Richard Widmark what compromise looks like, what silence costs, what happens when you choose safety over speaking up. But the next person in his letter taught him something else, that politics aren't just intellectual disagreements. They're personal, visceral, violent, and in 1960s Hollywood, political differences could make you enemies. Part 3. John Wayne, The Political Divide. John Wayne, the Duke, America's cowboy, the symbol of rugged individualism and conservative values. Richard Widmark worked with him once. That was enough. The letter, John Wayne. I know you've heard of him. Everyone has. The most famous actor in American history. The cowboy who defined masculinity for 3 generations. I worked with him in 1960, The Alamo. Wayne was directing, producing, and starring, playing Davy Crockett. I played Jim Bowie. I took the role because it was good money, good script, prestigious project. Wayne was at the height of his power. The first week we were professional, cordial. Both big men, both leads, both there to make a good film. Second week, politics came up. This was 1960. Kennedy versus Nixon. The civil rights movement is gaining momentum. Vietnam is heating up. America splitting along ideological lines. Wayne was hardcore conservative. Supported McCarthy. Supported the Hollywood blacklist. Thought anyone who questioned American policy was a communist traitor. I was liberal. Supported civil rights. Questioned Vietnam. Believed blind patriotism was as dangerous as no patriotism. We clashed. Constantly. The confrontation came on the 3rd week of shooting. We'd finished a scene. I was talking to one of the crew members about the civil rights marches, about integration, about equality. Wayne overheard me. Coming to my trailer after a wrap. "Dick," he said, "need to talk to you." I invited him in, offered him a drink. He declined. "I heard you talking about integration today." "That's right. You think Negroes should have the same rights as whites?" This was 1960. That question wasn't rhetorical. It was a test. "I think humans should have human rights," I said, regardless of skin color. His face went red. Actually red. "You're a communist, Dick, and communists don't belong in America." "I'm not a communist, John. I'm a liberal. There's a difference. Not to me. You're spreading red propaganda on my set, my film, my production." I stood up. We were eye to eye. Both 6FT, both tough guys, both angry. "John, this is 1960, not 1950. The blacklist is over. You can't intimidate people with that word anymore." He smiled. That famous John Wayne smile. "Can I? I'm producing this picture, directing it, starring in it. I could fire you tomorrow. Nobody would question it. I'd just say creative differences. And he was right. He could. He had the power, the influence, the status. I had two choices. Fight him, stand on principle, risk getting fired and blacklisted, or swallow my pride, finish the film, get paid, keep my career intact. I chose the career. John, I said quietly, I'll keep my political opinions to myself. We're here to make a film. Let's make it. He nodded. Good. That's what I wanted to hear. He left. I poured a drink and hated myself because that's not what the principled man does. The principled man fights, stands up, takes the hit. But the practical man, he compromises, he bends, he survives. And I was practical. Always practical. The film finished. It was a flop. Lost money. Critics hated it. Wayne blamed everyone but himself. We never spoke again. Saw each other at events. Nodded. Cold. Professional. But enemies. Not because of the film. Because of what the film represented. The moment I chose safety over principles. John Wayne died in 1979. Cancer. They called him an American hero. Maybe he was. But he was also a bully who used power to silence dissent. And I let him because fighting costs too much. That's the second compromise. Richard Widmark learned that principles are expensive, that standing up has consequences, that sometimes survival requires surrender. But the next person in his letter taught him something worse. That betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from friends. And when friends betray, the wound never heals. Part 4. Elia Kazan. The HUAC betrayal, Elia Kazan. The name still carries weight. One of the greatest directors in American cinema. A streetcar named Desire, on the waterfront, east of Eden. But to Richard Widmark, Elia Kazan represented something else. The ultimate betrayal. The moment friendship died. This is the longest section in Widmark's letter. The most painful. The one where his handwriting becomes shaky. Where ink blots suggest he stopped, started again, couldn't continue, forced himself forward. Elia Kazan. Gadge, we called him. Greek immigrant, brilliant director, method acting pioneer, the man who made Brando, the man who changed American cinema, and the man I never spoke to again after 1952. We made Panic in the Streets together in 1950, a New Orleans film about a plague outbreak. My favorite role up to that point. Kazan was incredible to work with. Pushed you, challenged you, made you dig deeper than you thought possible, found truth in every scene. We became friends. Real friends, not Hollywood friends who smile for cameras. Real friends. Dinners at his house. Philosophy, politics, art, life. Kazan was liberal, progressive, former Communist Party member in the 1930s. He'd left the party, become disillusioned, but he still believed in workers' rights, social justice, artistic freedom. So did I. We were allies, brothers in arms, fighting for a better Hollywood, a better America. Then 1952 came, and everything changed. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, the anti-communist witch hunt that terrified Hollywood for a decade. They called everyone who'd ever been near the Communist Party. Actors, directors, writers, hundreds of people, demanding they testify, demanding names. You had two choices. Refuse to testify, take the Fifth Amendment, and get blacklisted. Career over, no work, destroyed, or cooperate. Name names, betray friends, save yourself. Most of us chose the first option, took the blacklist, suffered but kept our dignity. Kazan chose the second. April 1952, I was having breakfast. Opened the Los Angeles Times. Front page. Elia Kazan cooperates with HUAC, names 8 former communists. Below, the list. 8 names, 8 artists, 8 friends. 3 of them were my friends, people I'd worked with, trusted, loved. And Kazan gave them to the wolves to save himself, to keep his career. Widmark's pain is visceral. I called him. The only time I ever called him after that. Gadge. Silence then. Dick. I know why you're calling. You named Paul. You named Lee. You named David. More silence. I had to, Dick. They were going to blacklist me, destroy me. I have a wife, kids, a career. We all have families, Gadge. We all have careers. Paul has 3 kids. Lee just bought a house. David's mother is sick. They all have reasons to work, but they took the blacklist. They kept their dignity. You don't understand the pressure. I understand perfectly. You chose yourself over everyone else. You chose your career over your friends. You chose survival over loyalty. What would you have done? He was shouting now. Finally honest, finally raw. I wanted to say I would have taken the blacklist. I would have stood with my friends. I would have suffered with honor. But I didn't know. If that was true, because I wasn't tested, the committee never called me, never put me in that position. So I said the only honest thing I could, I hope I would have done better than this. I hung up, never spoke to him again, not once, not in 46 years. The aftermath was brutal. Kazan went on to make masterpieces, On the Waterfront, Brando's Greatest Role, film about a man who informs on his friends. Art imitating life or justifying it. The three men Kazan named never worked again. Paul tried to get work in Mexico, failed, died in poverty in 1964. Lee moved to Europe, blacklisted there too. Suicide in 1958. David lasted longest, drove a cab, died in 1972, never made another film. Kazan won 2 Oscars, became a legend, American treasure. In 1999, the Academy gave him a Lifetime Achievement Oscar, 47 years after his testimony. Half the room stood and applauded. The other half sat in silent protest. I wasn't there, but if I had been, I would have sat. Not because I hate Kazan, hate is too simple, too clean, because I can't forgive betrayal. Can't forgive choosing career over conscience. Can't forgive giving friends to the wolves to save yourself. Would I have done differently? I don't know. And that uncertainty haunts me. But what I do know, betrayal is the one sin I can't forgive, the one compromise I can't accept. Kazan saved his career, won his Oscars, made his masterpieces, but he lost his soul. And that's a trade I pray I never have to make, though I'm not sure I wouldn't. And that terrifies me. This is the emotional core of Widmark's letter. The moment where his certainty cracks, where he admits, I don't know if I'm better than Kazan. I don't know if I would have stood firm. And that doubt, that uncertainty about his own courage, is what haunted him for 50 years. But there was one more name, one more disappointment, one more lesson about Hollywood hypocrisy. Part 5. Henry Fonda, the liberal hypocrite. Henry Fonda, the face of American integrity, the voice of liberal conscience, the actor who played Tom Joad, juror number 8, Abraham Lincoln. Richard Widmark expected him to be different, better, a true ally. He was disappointed. The letter, Henry Fonda. I admired him, genuinely admired him. He stood for civil rights, opposed Vietnam, spoke out when others stayed silent. He was what I tried to be, an actor with principles who wasn't afraid to use his platform. We worked together in 1968, Madigan, both playing New York cops. Good script, good role. I looked forward to it. Working with someone who shared my values, someone who understood that film isn't just entertainment. It's morality, it's politics, it's truth. The first week went well. We talked politics between takes. Agreed on everything. Civil rights, anti-war movement, social justice. I thought, finally, an ally, a real one. Second week, there was a small scene, my character and a black officer. The black officer had 3 lines, simple lines, but meaningful, about racial profiling, about police discrimination. The director wanted to cut it, saying it was too political, might upset Southern audiences, might hurt box office in conservative markets. I spoke up. That scene is important. It's true. This is 1968. We can't keep pretending racism doesn't exist. The director looked at Henry. Henry was the bigger star, had more power, more influence. Henry shrugged, literally shrugged. It's just 3 lines. Not worth fighting about. Let's keep the peace. Not worth fighting about. This from the man who gave speeches about civil rights, who attended marches, who publicly supported the movement. But when it came to his movie, his paycheck, his relationship with the studio, suddenly not worth fighting. The scene was cut. Widmark's bitterness comes through clearly. That's when I understood. Liberal Hollywood loves principles as long as they're free. Give a speech about equality, standing ovation, great publicity. Attend a march, cameras everywhere, cover of Life magazine. Actually fight for equality when it might cost money, suddenly silent. Henry Fonda was a hypocrite. Not maliciously, not consciously, but a hypocrite nonetheless. He believed in civil rights. Genuinely believed, but not enough to risk $1. He supported the movement as long as support didn't cost him anything. When principle conflicted with profit, profit won every time. And the worst part, he didn't see the contradiction. Thought he was still a good liberal, still fighting the good fight because he gave speeches, attended parties, wrote checks. But when it came to actual power, actual choice, actual sacrifice, he chose himself. Just like I did. Just like everyone did. That's what I learned from Henry Fonda. Principles are easy when they're cheap, hard when they cost something. And most of us, when faced with that cost, choose compromise. Henry died in 1982. They called him an American hero, a man of principle, an icon of integrity. Maybe he was, compared to most. But compared to what he could have been, he was just another actor who talked a good game and played it safe. Henry Fonda taught Richard Widmark that liberalism can be a performance, that the people who talk most about principles don't always live them, that Hollywood activism is often just good publicity. But there was still one more name, the most important name, the one that explains all the others. And it wasn't an actor, it wasn't a director, it was the system itself, embodied in one man, the man who owned Richard Widmark for 20 years. Part 6, Darryl F. Zanuck, the master. The letter shifts here, becomes darker, more honest, more devastating. Matthew. All of these people, Marilyn, Wayne, Kazan, Fonda, they were symptoms, pieces of a larger disease. The disease was the system. Hollywood, the studio system, the machine that turns humans into products and principles into liabilities. And that system had a face, a name, a voice. Darryl F. Zanuck, head of 20th Century Fox, the man who controlled my career for 20 years, the man who owned me. Zanuck was a legend, built Fox into a powerhouse, discovered talent, made stars, produced classics. But to his contracted actors, he was something else. A master, a controller, a man who owned human beings the way plantations once owned slaves. In 1947, I signed my first contract with Fox. 7 years, standard deal, $500 a week. Seemed like a fortune. It was a prison sentence. Because that contract didn't just buy my acting, it bought my choices, my freedom, my life. I couldn't make a film without Zanuck's approval, couldn't turn down a role without his permission, couldn't speak out politically without risking suspension. For 20 years, every major decision in my career went through Darryl Zanuck. And Zanuck had one priority: profit. Not art, not truth, not principle. Profit. When I wanted to turn down a racist role, Zanuck said, "The role pays well. Do it." When I wanted to speak out about civil rights, Zanuck said, "Keep your politics private, bad for business." When I wanted to support blacklisted colleagues, Zanuck said, "Stay out of it or join them." Every time I compromised, every time I told myself I had no choice. The contract, the system, the way things work. Then came the moment of truth. 1967, I was 53, made 50 films, been with Fox for 20 years. I went to Zanuck's office, said I wanted out of my contract, wanted independence, wanted to choose my own roles. He laughed, actually laughed. "Dick, you've been saying that for 10 years, and yet here you are." Because I had no choice. You always have a choice. He leaned forward, lit a cigar, looked at me like a specimen. "You chose money, security, fame. You chose to stay. Every year, every contract renewal, every role you hated, you chose. You threatened to blacklist me. I offered you an alternative. Stay and prosper or leave and struggle. You chose prosperity. That's not on me. That's on you." I wanted to argue, wanted to blame him, wanted to make him the villain. But he was right. Every year, I could have left, could have taken less money, could have risked my career for my principles. But I didn't, because I had a house, a family, a lifestyle, bills, responsibilities. So I stayed, signed the new contract, took the compromises, told myself I had no choice. But that was a lie. This is where the letter becomes a confession, not about others, but about himself. That's when I realized Zanuck wasn't the villain. I was. With these 5 people, Marilyn, Wayne, Kazan, Fonda, and Zanuck, they didn't make me compromise. They offered me choices. Hard choices, terrible choices, but choices. And I chose wrong every time, knowingly, consciously. Marilyn represents the talent I didn't defend because defending her might have cost me. Wayne represents the politics I didn't challenge because challenging him might have hurt me. Kazan represents the betrayal I judged but understood, because I don't know if I'd have done better. Fonda represents the hypocrisy I saw in him and recognized in myself. Zanuck represents the system I blamed while serving it willingly. But none of them forced me. None of them held a gun to my head. None of them made me do anything. I chose. Every compromise, every betrayal of principle, every moment of cowardice, I chose. And that's what I can't forgive. Not them. Myself. The twist continues, deepens. You want to know who I hate most, Matthew? Who truly deserves my rage? Richard Widmark. The man who had principles but didn't fight for them. Who preached courage but chose safety. Who judged others for compromising while compromising just as much. The man who spent 60 years pretending to be principled while selling out piece by piece. That's who I hate. That's who I can't forgive. Not Marilyn or Wayne or Kazan or Fonda or Zanuck. Me. Because they were who they were. Flawed, human, doing their best in an impossible system. But I pretended to be better, pretended to be different, pretended to be the principled man while being exactly the same as everyone else, just better at lying about it. That's the real betrayal. Not what they did to me, but what I did to myself, the person I became while pretending to be someone else. This is the double twist. Not just that Widmark compromised, but that he knew it, hated himself for it, lived with that self-hatred for 60 years, and never said a word until this letter. Part 7. Epilogue, Living with Compromise. The letter ends with a lesson. A hard one, painful, honest. Matthew, I'm writing this in 1997. Your grandmother just died. I'm 83 years old, alone for the first time in 55 years. And all I can think about are the compromises, the choices I regret, the moments I failed to be the man I pretended to be. I made 80 films, had a good career, good life, good marriage, no scandals, no controversies, clean legacy. But I'm not at peace because I know the truth. I wasn't as principled as people thought. I compromised constantly, just like everyone else. Maybe less than some, maybe more than others, but I compromised. And that shame never leaves. That knowledge that you betrayed yourself, that you chose comfort over courage, that you were given chances to be brave and you chose to be practical. So why am I telling you this? Why confess after 60 years of silence? Because you're 25 starting your career. Journalism, you said. Investigative journalism. Finding truth, exposing corruption. You'll face choices, hard choices, money or morals, safety or courage, career or conscience. And sometimes, Matthew, you'll choose wrong. We all do. We're human. But here's what I learned. If you compromise, own it. Don't pretend you had no choice. Don't blame the system or the boss or the industry. Don't lie to yourself. Say, I chose safety. I chose money. I chose myself. I knew better. I did it anyway. That's honest. That's human. That's forgivable. What's not forgivable is pretending you're a hero when you're not. Pretending you stood firm when you bent. Pretending you're principled when you compromise. I did that for 60 years and it ate at me every single day. Don't be like me. Be honest with yourself, with others, with history. If you compromise, admit it. Learn from it. Do better next time. But don't spend 60 years lying about it. Don't build a reputation on false principles. Don't become the thing you pretend not to be. That's the real shame, not the compromise, the pretense. I was Richard Widmark, the principled man. But I should have been Dick Widmark, the flawed human who tried and sometimes failed. One is honest, one is a lie. I chose the lie. For 60 years, choose better. Love. Grandpa Dick Matthew finished reading, sat in silence for an hour. He never mailed the letter, never showed it to anyone until now. Because some confessions aren't meant to teach, they're meant to heal. And Richard Widmark, dying at 93, spent his last years trying to heal a wound 60 years old. The wound of knowing he wasn't who he pretended to be. And living with that knowledge every single day. He died in 2008, March 24th. Emphysema, quiet death, good life. The obituaries called him a man of principle, an actor who stood for something, Hollywood's thinking man. All true and all incomplete, because Richard Widmark was also a man who compromised, who chose safety over courage, who judged others for sins he committed himself. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a hero. He was human, flawed, complicated, real. And in the end, that's the lesson. Not that compromise is unforgivable, but that dishonesty about compromise is. Richard Widmark spent 60 years being dishonest with the world, with himself. And his last act was honesty. Raw, painful, complete. That's not redemption, but it's something. It's true. And maybe the truth is all any of us can offer when the cameras stop, when the audience leaves, when the character finally dies and the person underneath has to face himself. Richard Widmark faced himself. And what he saw wasn't pretty, but it was real. And real is harder, braver, more honest than any role he ever played. The principled man died in 1947 when he signed that contract. The honest man was born in 1997 when he wrote that letter. 60 years too late, but born nonetheless. And maybe that's enough. Not for forgiveness, but for peace. The kind of peace that comes not from being perfect, but from finally admitting you never were.